Hello, welcome, good afternoon. So, welcome to, this is our third tutorial. We've already done a tutorial on vinyasas and we've done a tutorial on warrior 1 and 2. So this is number 3 and we're doing tripod headstand today. So tripod headstand is probably my favorite of all of the, inversions and arm balances, all of like the fun playtime yoga postures and transitioning postures. Tripod headstand is probably by far my favorite. Reasons for that are, one, I feel really stable in it. I think it was probably the first inversion that I learned. But two, there's just so much that you can do with it, which I'm going to show you towards the end. You can come in and out of so many postures with it, and it's really fun. So what this video is going to cover is, first, I'm going to go over your basic setup of the posture, your base. I always talk about in classes, you need to set up a good base first, because if you don't set up a good base, then everything that goes up from the base is probably going to be a little bit sketchy. So we'll talk about how to set up a good base first. Pretty much immediately after that, we're going to talk about how to bail out of a tripod headstand, because that's something really important that you need to know how to do. So we'll talk about that. We will cover that. We'll talk then about how to actually get totally extended, different ways to get upside down, and then we'll talk about the fun stuff about how to, how you can play around with it, how you can add it into your practice. So before we jump in, I am going to say that yes, the tripod headstand, it can be, if you're not doing it properly, it can put your body in a not so great position. So that's one of the reasons that we're doing this, is so that I can talk you through the safety aspects of it, give you all of the alignments that you will need in order to do this safely. Now, I'm very comfortable teaching this in a class situation and being able to have eyes on people and say, you need to change this, you need to change this, you need to change this in order to make the posture safer for people. However, I don't have that ability right now, and you don't have the ability for me to be able to watch you and say, this is good, this needs to change. So just be safe. As I said, I'm going to go over everything. So what I recommend you do is, one, if you're doing this live with the intention of trying stuff, you should be warm. You should have warmed up. If you have not warmed up, just watch and come back later and try it later. I can't remember where I was going with that. Two, as you do this at home, if you're not doing this live, just pause the video after each step. There's going to be a lot of little steps throughout the tutorial, so just pause it after each step and make sure you can do each step before you move on to the next one, right? And when I say make sure you can do each step, what I mean by that is, as I said, I can't see you to make corrections. So double, triple check your positioning, your postures, get a camera, film yourself and rewatch it, compare it and say, is this what I'm actually looking for? If there's somebody in the house with you, say, hey, come on over, I need your help, watch this video, this is what I'm trying to replicate, can you watch me now do it and tell me if I'm actually doing that or not? And it's much better to have another set of eyes on you, especially for a posture like this, because you're upside down, you can't turn your head to look at what your body is doing. So having another set of eyes, even if it's a camera, so that you can go back and use your eyes later, that is perfect. But just please be safe when you're doing this, because I would hate for anybody to do something like this when I can't help you and get yourself into a not so great position. So now that I have given that spiel, we are going to head on over to the mat and begin. Tutorials I've kind of been running about a half an hour. They've been taking about a half an hour. I expect that this one is probably going to be about the same amount of time. So here we go. First is your setup, your basic setup. Now in a tripod headstand, you have 3 points of contact on the mat, your hands and the top of your head. Now the part of your head that is on the mat is the crown of your head. So that's the flat piece right on the top if you were looking straight forwards. It is not your hairline, it is not your forehead, it is not the pointy bit in the back, it is the flat piece right on the top. What that does is it makes sure that your neck is in a neutral position. It's not tipped forwards and it's not extended back the way. You need your neck in a neutral position so that you can stack that part of your spine rather than having it compromised. So stacking that is important. Now, the 3 points that are on the mat, hands and head. So what you do is your hands are going to be about shoulder width apart. We'll go into what the arms do in a second, but we'll talk just about the hands first. About shoulder width apart in the hands, and then your head, if anybody passed geometry in school, you're looking for about an equilateral triangle. Equilateral triangle means that all 3 sides of your triangle are going to be the same length, right? So if I have my hands here, then I'm going to set my head just about out here. So now when I'm down, I still have my knees on the mat. I'm not going anywhere here. Once I'm down, I can see my hands. I can see my fingertips clearly just by looking in my periphery. I don't have to turn my head to see my fingers. I'm not straining to see my fingers. Now, if you look up my arms a bit at my elbows, you can see that my elbows are about at a 90-degree angle. My elbow is stacked just on top of my wrist. You might be thinking to yourself, that looks like a familiar arm position. You guessed it, it's basically just chaturanga arms. So we went over chaturanga in a tutorial last week. Chaturanga, your elbows, if you're going to full depth, just reach 90 degrees. It's the same thing here. Now, my elbows are not only stacked on top of my wrists, but what is that called? I don't know. They're not just stacked right on top in terms of forwards and back, but in terms of side to side as well. I don't have my hands on the mat with my elbows splayed way out to the sides. They're tucked in and pointing straight back over the back edge of my mat. So once again, hands on my mat about shoulder width apart, crown of the head to the mat, just about an equal distance away from my hands as my hands are from each other. Elbows are pointing straight back, elbows are straight on top, right on top of my wrists. Now you might be looking at that and saying, but Kat, your neck is not in a great position there. That's okay. That's only because my knees are still on the mat, my hips are way back. Once the body is stacked, your neck goes right into that neutral stacked position. So that is all good. Okay, so talking about the hands. Now, as I said, this is one of the most important things that you should get another set of eyes on you for. One of the most common things that I see when I teach tripod headstand in classes is that people will start with a very shallow base. And what I mean by that is, I'm going to turn my mat slightly, is that instead of having this wide position, this equilateral triangle with their hands in their head, their hands will start up here and they'll say, well, yeah, I can see my fingers, yeah, kind of, sort of, but they can't see them clearly at this point. They can maybe see their thumbs, but what you can see happening here is that once I've done that is my base has gotten much narrower. It's much easier for you to balance on a wider base than it is for you to balance on a straight line, right? So the shallower that your base gets, the closer that your hands get to your head, the more difficult it's going to be for you to control your weight as it goes back and forth. So you want your hands to stay wide. It also sets your shoulders in a good position, your arms in a good position to help create that control. So equilateral triangle, make sure you get eyes on that, make sure you can guarantee that you are in the right position. It'll feel quite wide when you start doing it if you're not completely comfortable with it or used to it, but that's okay. It should be that wide. Now, moving forwards here. So that is your basic setup of your hands and your head. Now, we're going to start moving into how to actually get upside down. I'm going to show you how to get your weight into your hands and into your hands and your head and get it out of your feet. After we do that, I'm going to teach you how to bail out. So, bringing the weight into your hands and the feet. You're going to start with that same base. Hands, shoulder width apart, crown of the head to the mat. My knees will lift,
and then I'll start to walk my feet towards my head. Now, what you can see happen there is you watch my hips, and you can watch the relationship in my neck and my back here. As my hips lift, already the angle of my neck has started to lessen. As I walk my feet forwards, all of a sudden, I'm starting to stack my whole upper body here, my torso here. My hips are working to stack over my shoulders and my head. Now, from here, again, elbows not dropped out to the side. Elbows are squeezing right in. First thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take one knee and I'm going to set it on top of my tricep, and I'm going to pull that heel up into my butt. So I'm already starting to shift more and more weight into my head and my hands. I'm pushing down through my hands, and I'm drawing my shoulders away from my neck, making sure my neck is long and it's supported. Then, next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to bend my other knee and set that knee onto my tricep. But you can see those toes are still on the mat. I'm still using that as a little kickstand here. Next is that those toes will float. You can still keep it close to the mat so that if you need it, you've got that little bit of balance. Next is that heel also comes up towards your butt. So, those are your next options. That is basically just how to transfer your weight out of your feet, out of your lower body and into your upper body, and start stacking the body. Now, there were lots of little steps in that first big step. So as I said right at the start, make sure that you're nailing each step before you move on to the next one. So for example, feel comfortable with one knee on the tricep, then feel comfortable with the other knee on the tricep and the toes on the mat, then feel comfortable with both knees on the tricep and the toes just floating off of the mat, then start to bring both heels up to your butt. Once you've done that, now you're in the perfect position to learn how to bail, to learn how to roll out of it. Now, this is fun. I promise this is fun. But if you're going to do this, you are going to need a little bit of space out in front of you because you're going to tuck and you're going to roll out onto the mat. Now, the reason that I'm teaching you how to do this is because when you're upside down, if you start to lose your balance, as soon as your center of gravity goes a little bit too far past your head, you don't have anything to stop you going any further, right? If you're coming towards your hands, you just push into your hands and you can push your upper body, your lower body, and stack it back on top. But as soon as you go past your head, there's nothing on the other side of your head to push you back. And that's when people tend to freak out. And what will tend to happen is a couple things. One, they will flail their legs or collapse into their neck. Not great things to do. Two, they will flop right down onto their back, and their full momentum will just be absorbed by the ground, and they will be put into a dead stop, and it's not going to feel great. So neither of those are things that we want to do. So the tuck and roll method, basically it just kind of brings your whole body into a little ball, and your momentum is kind of absorbed as you roll out of it. This is what it looks like, and then I will explain what is actually happening. I practiced it this morning to make sure that I wasn't going to freak out trying to do this because I do it all the time, and yes, I still get a little bit nervous, so it is normal. Okay, so this is what it looks like. You'll do the same setup, knees onto your triceps, and then as you go out, excuse me, I'm just going to take this bun off of my head. As you roll out, you will tuck into a little ball and ta-da! So, as I didn't hurt myself at all there. What happened is I was already, for the most part, in my lower body in this little tucked position. My legs were already close to my belly. My knees were already into my chest. So I just had to keep them there. All that I really had to change was my upper body. I gave myself a little push, and then I tucked my chin to my chest so that I landed on my shoulders, right? So you have to commit to this, right? When you're going over, if you don't commit to it, chances are your neck is going to be put in a funny position, or you'll get halfway there and you'll just land flat down onto your neck rather than landing onto your shoulders and then continue to roll. So you have to commit to it. As I said, I gave myself a little push. When I started to tip over, I said, okay, I'm going, I accept this. I just kept my knees to my chest, tucked my chin to, tucked my chin to my chest. So I did kind of tip off of my head, and then I just rolled out. I just kept myself in that little ball and just accepted that and trusted that my body was going to be fine on the other side. So once again, this is what it will look like, and this is something that you should practice. Not just know how to do, but practice how to do, because when you get fully upside down, if you start to go over, your legs are fully extended, so that's another thing that you have to do. You have to bring your legs into your chest before you roll out. So, you know, there's already a whole lot going on. So your body wants to know what it's doing rather than you have to like already be a little bit stressed out by the fact that you're losing your balance and then also have to remember, oh shit, what the heck do I do here? You want to know how to do it, so you want to practice this. So one more time, this is what it will look like. Practicing. Knees onto your triceps once you get to this point, and then you will push yourself through your arms and tuck your chin to your chest as you roll out. And there we go. So, as I said, practice that, do that a bunch of times, have some fun with it. It is entertaining as you do it, once you get the hang of it. Okay, so that is bailing out. So we now have a base, and we know how to bail out of it in case things go wrong. Next thing is how to actually get upside down and get fully extended upside down. Now there's a few ways that we can go into this. I'm going to start facing this direction. I think that this will, you'll be able to see things a little bit easier from this side. So we're going to be moving from that first position with the knees on the triceps. So I'm going to go upside down. Knees onto my triceps. Now from here, your first thing to do is just to see if you can maybe just lift one knee up off of the tricep. It's not coming very high, it's just lifting a little bit. I'm then gonna set that one down, and then I'm gonna lift the other knee. And I'm pretty comfortable there. The next thing is to see if you can extend the legs. Now, the first way that you're gonna do that is just extending one leg at a time. It will go straight, but it won't go straight up. As I said, you want to be aware of your balance, especially when you're first learning how to do this. If you try to take your leg straight up, chances are it's going to go too far behind you and it's going to tip you out, which isn't the worst thing in the world because now you know how to bail safely, but we don't really want to have to get to that point. So you're going to start with the leg a bit more forwards, and then you'll lift it up, seeing if you can find the balance point. This is what that looks like. So instead of lifting this leg straight up, it will probably, for most of you, go too far back. What you're going to do is you're going to lift it out kind of in front of you, get it straight, and then start to pull that leg straight up towards the ceiling, and then bring it back down and do it on the other side. So that leg will extend out, and then it will lift straight up, and then I will bend the knee and set it back down, and come back down, out of that. So that's your next one. Just getting, again, you're just kind of acclimating your body to being upside down. Finding control when you're upside down is really important so that, you know, you can make corrections when you're up there. Next is, okay. Next one. Pretty much the same, but you're going to then lift the other knee up a little bit. So what that looks like is upside down. One leg lifts and then comes straight up. I'm going to reach through this top leg, drive down through my arms, lift my belly in, and see if I can lift my other knee and just float my other knee just off of my tricep, and then set that knee down. On the other side, that leg goes out and then straight up. I'm going to lift through that top leg, pull this heel to my butt, and see if I can pull this knee up a little bit, and then set it back down, and then come back down. That is your next option. From there, next one from there is seeing if you can move both legs at the same time. You'll feel that your core starts working a whole lot more when you start using both legs at the same time. Now you're not going to extend both legs right away. First thing is just seeing if you can get both knees off of your triceps. What that's going to feel like is your belly is going to pull back a little bit, and knees will probably be sitting somewhere in the middle of your tricep. You're going to think about your knees sliding into your armpits, which will lift them up. This is what that looks like with your base. So again, knees are on the tricep somewhere. My belly is active. My belly is going to start to pull back. My knees slide into my triceps, into my armpits, and they float. And I'm just going to hover about an inch. Again, I don't want to go too far because eventually I'll get too far on the other side. You'll start overextending your spine. Once the trunk of your spine, once that starts to overextend, your neck will start to overextend. Typically what happens in one part of your spine will kind of transfer to the rest of it. So you want to make sure that your body is staying as neutral and as stacked as possible. So again, just coming up a little bit, and then you'll pretty much do the same thing with the legs when they're together as what you did with when you were only lifting one knee off of the tricep at a time, which is extend them out in front of you a bit and then lift them up. So knees into the armpits, kick my legs out, and then start to lift them up slowly, slowly, slowly until both legs are straight up overhead. Okay, so yes, yes, yes. All right, awesome. Now, the next bit. So we're gonna move on here a little bit to another way of lifting. So instead of lifting from knees on your triceps, you're going to lift with feet from the floor. So I usually use knees on the triceps as your starting position because it means that people are less likely to jump into the posture. If you jump into the posture, all of your momentum is going into your head. And if you don't have the control to stop that, you will tip, and you will not tip with control. Not a good place to be. That is another reason that I don't teach this with a wall. As you can see, I've not talked about using a wall at any point. I've talked about how to set up your base, and I've talked about how to bail out if you go too far. I don't typically use a wall when I teach this, again, because it encourages people to just jump into it and say, well, I'll figure it out when I get upside down. I don't typically like doing that. It's not the safest way to do things, especially when you're putting weight into your head and your neck. So I don't want you to jump. Starting with your knees on your triceps brings your weight immediately into your head and your hands. So you're more prepped, you're more primed for finding the control and finding that balance position. Now we move into not using the knees on the triceps. So your next step is kind of similar stuff, just taking the feet from the floor. So first one, knee to chest. Yes, yes. Okay, so first one is you will come up and you will walk your feet towards you as far as they can go in. Now you will just bend one knee into your chest and bring that heel up towards your butt. Now you're not setting the knee onto your triceps. You're pulling the body up and in. Once you feel comfortable there, maybe your other toes just float off of the mat. Maybe they don't. And then you try the other side. So left knee will bend, shift my weight into my head, my hands push through the arms. Maybe eventually the right toes float. That is your first set of transition. Again, just learning where is the balance. Next one from there is starting to bring both knees into your chest. So you would start the same way, walking the feet in, one knee into your chest, and then if you have your balance here, maybe pull that heel up into your butt as well. Again, being sure that you're not going too far over. You're just changing the legs here. The hips and the back, that hasn't changed much at all in these positions. You're just changing the shape of the legs. Once the legs start to extend, then the hips change a little bit, but it's mostly just legs when you're getting the feet off of the floor. Okay, so you've got both knees in, and then from there you do the same thing that you did when you were bringing the knees from your triceps as you start to extend out and then up the way. Next one is one straight leg, then the other leg lifts. So that looks like this, walking the feet in. I'm going to lift one straight leg up, and then I'm going to lift up and pull up through that foot. Maybe my left leg will float. Maybe I'm going to bring that foot into my glute. Maybe I extend that leg up. Other side, left leg lifts up. I'm going to pull up and I'm going to push down. Eventually my right toes will float. Maybe the heel pulls into my glute. Maybe I kick up and meet the feet together. Whew. Okay, next one is my favorite, is moving two straight legs together. So as you go upside down, we've done lots of one-legged stuff, and we did both legs together when the knees were coming off the triceps. Now, working towards having both legs together with straight legs. So what you'll do is basically the same thing you just did. You're kind of thinking about a forwards fold here. So when you do a forwards fold, it's not just collapse the body into your fold. It's active legs, long spine, and you're pulling your body into your legs. It's a whole active position, but usually it's the body going to the legs rather than the legs coming to the body, which is what you want to think about here. Legs coming into the body, hips lifting up to lengthen a little bit further. That's the kind of stuff that you're thinking about when you're going in with two straight legs. So that one looks like this. Walking the feet in, bringing my legs together, squeezing my inner thighs together, lifting up through my hips, pushing through my arms. Eventually my toes are weightless. Eventually they start to lift, maybe just to parallel. Maybe they start to lift all the way up overhead. Okay, so lots and lots and lots of things. Those are your basics. I know that those last few there were probably a little bit more advanced entrances into your tripod headstand, but for the most part, those are your basics. Just getting upside down. As I said before, there were a lot of steps. I didn't spend a whole lot of time on each step because I don't see people right now, so I'm expecting that later on you'll just pause, give it a couple tries, maybe rewind a little bit and watch it a couple times. Also because all I'm basically doing right now is standing on my head, and it's taking a bit of a toll. So we're going to move on. As I said, those were your basics. Now, moving into the fun stuff, which is the stuff that I love doing. This is basically how do you put it into your practice. I do occasionally say, hey, if you've got a tripod headstand, go for it here. But typically I don't, because the majority of the classes that I teach, there's not a whole lot of people that have tripod headstand. So I might give it once or twice, but this is a good way just to kind of be aware of, like, where can I put it into my practice? And there's lots of fun places that it can go. So one of those places is lifting from a straddle. So Prasarita Padasana, feet are wide, and you're in your fold. Now from here, when I teach the folding classes, I talk about the arms. Let me see if I can position myself so you can see my arms. I talk about the arms that you would walk your hands back, maybe so that the fingers are in line with the toes eventually, and then your hands are shoulder width apart and the elbows drive back. Now, once again, you might be thinking, Kat, that looks like a really familiar arm position. You guessed it, I'm taking you into chaturanga arms, so that eventually, when you get far enough in, your hands are back, your elbows are pulled back, eventually the crown of the head will meet the mat, you'll be able to shift into your head and your hands, keep reaching through the toes, and lift the legs straight out. Eventually, maybe, straight up. So that's one. Next. Okay, so next is just another lift from a posture which I really enjoy. You would come into this with from a seated position. So eagle legs when you're standing, it's one leg wrapping around the other, ankles hooking in. You need to do funky stuff with your arms as well. But you can come into eagle legs from your tripod headstand. Now you would either do this from Ardha Matsyendrasana, which has your knees bent, that is a twisting position, or you would do this from Gomukhasana, which would have your knees stacked, and that is a hip opener. whichever works. We'll go from Ardha Matsyendrasana because that's a more common posture, especially that I use in my teaching. So what you would do from here is shift forwards, hands to the mat. Now I would use my back toes for this. I would tuck my back toes under and I would use that to push off. As I push off, my thighs will close onto one another. So hands are on the mat, crown of the head is down. I will drive through my back knee. I will walk those back knee up. I will then lift and then tuck the other ankle behind, or excuse me, toes behind my ankle and pull the legs up. As I'm coming down, I will extend the legs first, releasing the bind, and then bring the legs down. So that's another option. Next is when you're upside down, you can go into, so that was two inverted leg variations. Another is going into lotus, which I'm going to attempt to show, but I don't know if I might be able to get there while I'm upside down. We'll see. I'm going to do this backwards. Please excuse me. I'm actually going to do it facing this way. No, we'll do it this way. So please excuse this while I lift. We'll go upside down. And once we're up, one ankle in front of the other hip, in front of the other thigh. Yeah, the other ankle kind of hooks in there, and then reaching up. So you're in your full lotus position, and then you would come down, which I'll show you a fun transition for coming down in a moment as well. So that's another option, being upside down. Okay, now, we can talk about crow. So crow is probably your most common arm balance that you're going to see, or that you're going to be given an option for. Crow is hands shoulder width apart, surprise, surprise, elbows bend back, elbows on top of the wrists, feet float, balancing on your hands. That is crow. Again, you might have looked at my arms and said, that looks similar to another posture that we do a lot called chaturanga. You're correct. It is very similar to chaturanga arms. There's a reason that I did the vinyasa tutorial first. Oh, excuse me. So, sorry, that was my front door. Okay, so crow pose. You can come. One of my favorite transitions is coming into headstand from crow and coming back to crow from headstand. You might have also now drawn the connection from the starting position to getting upside down to crow. This, your starting position when you had your head on your mat and your elbows on your knees on your triceps, that looks very similar to having your knees on your triceps and just having your head floating off of the mat. You are correct. So going into and out of those two postures. Going into it, you just kind of start to close off the elbow a little further, tuck your head, crown of the head to the mat, then maybe lift. When you're coming back, it takes a little bit more strength because you kind of have to push a little bit. I typically draw my elbows back over my wrists, lift up through my belly, and drive down through my arms, trying to open the extension in my elbow. So this is what that will look like if I'm coming from crow through headstand back to crow. So we'll start in crow pose. I will then tip forwards, turn my head under, I'm on the crown of my head. I'll then lift up. And then coming back to crow, bend my knees into my chest. Knees then separate onto my triceps. Like I said, elbows will go back a little bit. Hopefully I can do this without tipping over. I will drive down through my arms, start to lift my chest. Yeah. Lift the hips and the belly back up into crow pose. It's been a while since I've done that transition, so that was fun. One of my favorites. And it's simple. If you're doing crow pose, work, it's really simple to just kind of like tip into that and practice that. If you have a good basic knowledge of both postures, bakasana and headstand, then you can start working with that transition as well. I'm not going to go into the rest of there's many other transitions, like basically all arm balances you can go into and out of from tripod headstand, again, because of the arm position. The arm position is chaturanga arms, so, and that's the same for almost all of your arm balances as well as this tripod headstand. So it's pretty simple once you understand the basics and you have some body awareness and that bit of strength, then it's pretty simple to figure out, okay, how do I transition from this one to this one now? Last thing that I'm going to teach you is going from tripod headstand straight into chaturanga. Chaturanga is your lowered kind of push-up position. We talked about that last week. It is the first posture in your vinyasa, which is used in vinyasa classes as your transition. So you see that a lot, the chaturanga a lot. Now, because the arms are already in that position, you're really just changing the rest of the body. If you look at chaturanga and you look at where my body is positioned, if I tip my head down, pretty much all you would have to do is take my whole flat body and lift it up, and I'm in tripod headstand. And vice versa, just taking it down. However, I do not go from headstand into chaturanga with a plank, straight body. I don't just like let the rest of my body fall to the mat. What I do is I pike first, so I hinge at my hips, bringing my feet towards the mat. I float my feet just an inch or so off the mat, and then hover my feet all the way back. Now, as my feet go back, my hips will lower. I'll lift my head at that point, and eventually, once my body is at full extension, my feet will land on the mat, and that'll be me in chaturanga. This is what that will look like. Okay, so I am upside down in headstand. I will pike until my feet are just floating off the mat. I will then hover my feet all the way back, extend my hip, and look forward into chaturanga, upward facing dog, downward facing dog. Going straight with a plank body, it's not the end of the world. However, typically what will happen there is that your hips and your lower back will absorb that, and the shock of you landing on the mat, because again, you've got all of this momentum coming straight down towards the mat. Your feet come into a dead stop. Your upper body isn't really going anywhere. So then you're just left with the stuff in the middle, which is your hips and your lower back. And that will typically just kind of like spring down towards the floor and then bounce back up again. It's just not really, it's unnecessary pressure on your lower back. So doing it that way, bringing my feet down and then extending, it takes some of that out, and it lets you have a bit more control in it as well. You are still pushing through the arms and all of that, but you do have quite a good little bit more of control. So I think that's pretty much it. 35-ish minutes of total talking time, I think. Might have been a little bit closer to 40, but whoops. So we talked about the base, and we talked about how to bail. Again, practice that because it's like the most important thing, really, after your base, of course. We talked about how to extend up, getting your legs upwards, and we talked about like the fun stuff. So, as I said right at the start, safety first. Like, film yourself, ask somebody to watch and make sure that you're doing it properly. I think that's it. If you have any questions, put them in the comments and I will do what I can to answer them. I think sometimes it's a little bit harder answering yoga questions in type than it is when you're in a class. But I'll do what I can to answer questions if you have them on this stuff. Yeah, tonight we've got a level 3 class and I'm going to throw some headstands in. I'll throw in some options so that you can take them if you've practiced. And I might talk a little bit about it and give you a little bit of time to get upside down and to test it out. That's it. Okay, well, thanks for tuning in. And I will see you guys tonight or tomorrow. There's a full schedule tomorrow, so I'll see you guys shortly. Bye.